Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Taylormadecards4u. Well, today I'm playing with a new stencil that I picked up over at Spellbinders, and it is part of the BB Cameron collection that was just recently released. Now, ordinarily I don't play with stencils too much, but I really love stencils where you can actually create images that look like they're stamped. And I know that there's a lot of stencils out there where you can do layers and create beautiful images, but I don't play with those too much, so I was really excited to try out this stencil. What I also liked about this stencil is not only can you create the ornaments, you can also create jingle bells, which I'm going to be creating for you in just a moment. You also get a couple of these circle pieces that could easily be used as moons as well. So I think that there's a lot of options with this stencil set, not just to create the ornaments, but to create other designs as well. Now, the two inks that I'm working with today are a Lost Shadow, and I'm working with a distressed oxide as well as the distressed ink because I wanted to have a lighter and a darker color, but I wanted it to be in the same color palette. So using the same size circle, I went ahead and took the Lost Shadow Distress Oxide, and I created three circles. I'm going to have kind of like a jingle bells that are next to each other, so I wanted to just go ahead and have them overlap. And I wasn't too worried about having to cover up each circle because every time I shaded, it did give a little bit of a border, so I felt that was good enough. And I'm going to be adding some Distress Lost Shadow ink, which is a little bit darker, and that way you'll be able to see the bells a little bit more distinctly. Alright, so once I had my three circles, I went ahead and I got out my Distress ink, again using Lost Shadow, and I used a part of the stencil that creates the little shadow on the bottom as well as right in the middle. And I was just really careful to kind of pay attention to what direction I wanted my bulb to be going in. I didn't necessarily want them to all be standing up in the same direction, so you can easily adjust the stencil to have the bulbs or the bells going in different directions. So I repeated the process for all three of the bells, just paying attention to the direction that I wanted to have my shadowing. On the top one, you can see it's kind of off center a little bit to the right, and then the bottom one, which I'm going to be working on right now, is again going to be a little bit more off center to the right, and then when I work on the left bell, it will be a little off center to the left. So that way it doesn't look like the bells are just perfectly aligned, it looks like they're just kind of scattered on the floor. Now, depending on how dark your bells are, you might have to use some of the other plastic circles to cover the bells that you've already highlighted. The one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to add that darker shadow of gray over the bulbs because then it just won't look realistic. So as I started the third bell, I went ahead and I positioned it again just like I did the other two, and I started adding my my Lost Shadow and through the stencil I was able to see it with no problem, but I was a little bit concerned when I started to add the ink towards the right, hitting the other bells. I was afraid that I would overlap onto them, so I went ahead and I grabbed the little round circle to mask the top bell, so that way if I did overlap, it wouldn't go onto the third bell. And as you can see here, they were able to line up really nicely, making it look like three distinct bells. Alright, so now it was time to move on to the top piece that goes on top of the bell, where you would typically use to hang it if you wanted to hang it onto a tree or a door or something like that. And I'm using my Distress ink Lost Shadow because I wanted it still to be darker, and I'm just positioning it on top of the bell. Now, as you can see, I'm kind of aligning this little metal part aligned with the bottom part, so that way it looks like it's even. I definitely don't want to have the top portion of that bell off center. I want it to definitely look like it's aligned, so I made sure to line it up with the bottom to make it look like a true a true bulb here. All right, so once I was finished adding the top portion to the bell, then I decided to add just a little bit of shadowing, and I just grabbed one of my alcohol ink pens, my Copic markers, and I'm just adding a little bit of shadow on the bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim this up. I'm going to make an A2 card, so I want my card to be 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and then I'll mat it onto some black cardstock. Now this card is going to be clean and simple. It's going to have a lot of white background, and the colors that I'm using are just very subtle. I don't typically do clean and simple backgrounds, but for these jingle bells, I wanted the emphasis, of course, to just be on the bells with just a simple sentiment. And the sentiment that I'm going to be working with is just called Jingle All the Way. The BB Camera release had some really nice stencils as well as dies, and as you can see, the stencils were great. I not only was able to create an ornament card, but I was also able to create these little jingle bells. And then this little tag here that I'm going to be stamping on is part of the die collection that I also received from her collection. Now, this is another first for me. I don't typically stamp white onto black cardstock, so this video is all about firsts for me. The first time I started stamping with the white ink, it was a little splotchy, so I went ahead and I cleaned off the ink, and I just lightly tapped to get just barely enough ink, and then I found I really want to just put minimal pressure when I'm stamping onto the black cardstock. If I put too much pressure, that's when the white got a little bit gunky and it just didn't stamp very crisp. But as you can see here, this was really crisp, and I was really happy that I did practice a little bit. Now, a lot of people at this point will also add white embossing powder, but I didn't. All I did was just kind of heat it up and dry it just to make sure that my white ink would not smear, and then I'm going to pop it up with some foam tape. And then once I added the sentiment, I kind of fussed a little bit. I wasn't really sure exactly where I wanted the sentiment to go. I didn't know if I wanted to cover the jingle bells on the bottom, but ultimately, because I had all that white space on top, I ended up adding the sentiment more towards the top third of the card. And then I got some black cardstock, and I matted the white cardstock onto the black cardstock as well. So at this point, I could have really called the card complete, but I just felt it just had a little bit too much white. And I know this is supposed to be a clean and simple card, but I just needed to add a little bit more color. So since the bells were silver, I decided to add some gold sequins just to go with the whole Christmas theme of silver and gold. So I just grabbed a few of my gold sequins, again, something I don't use very often, but I added a few sequences to the card just to give it a little bit more color. And then once I added the sequins, I went ahead and I added both of my card fronts to my white card base, and at this point the card should have been complete. But again, as I was looking at this card, I just felt like there was just too much white on the top, so ultimately I ended up coming back in with a little bit of just green holly to add to the card to add a little bit more color. And so my clean and simple card just turned out to have a little bit more color than what I had anticipated, but I really felt that it did add a little bit more interest to the card. So that's it. I hope that you've enjoyed my video with a lot of firsts for me. The first time that I'm using this layered stencil, one of the first times that I'm doing clean and simple, just because I don't do that very often. The first time that I stamped white ink onto black cardstock, and then again using some sequences that I don't typically use. So some firsts and some things that I just haven't done in a while. So don't forget, dig into your stash, and don't forget to get just kind of go out of your comfort zone a little bit. Sometimes things that we think don't work for us, if you just add a little bit of your own style to a style that you don't use very often, you can turn it into something that you're happy with, and you've had a lot of fun doing it in the process. Alright everybody, I will leave links to all of the products that I've used in this video, so I hope that you do check out this new stencil set because it really is pretty cool. I love the way that I was able to create some bells, and the ornaments were a lot of fun to create as well. Alright everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.